Hey, this is Ellen in St. Bart's. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
This is Brackley in Las Vegas, Nevada, and welcome to Light Talk.
This is Stan in Gainesville, Florida, and today we're talking about buying used moving lights, time boundaries, not getting fired, should I buy incandescent or LED, and creative brain worms, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
And sister.
That's right, Ellen. That's right. How you doing today? We got Brackley on the show. We've got Ellen on the show. We've got Stan on the show. We've got me. Steve is taking the day off.
He never takes a day off. It's sort of amazing.
He took the day off, man. He took the day off.
No, good for him. Good for him. Like, work-life balance, man.
Absolutely. Light Talk was getting just too much and too much insanity, so he took the day off. But it's great to have Brackley back. Hey, Brackley. What have you been up to, man?
Just retirement.
You just sitting around?
Yep, just sitting around. No, I'm working. I'm working with the theater department, getting an advocacy board going and some of those things. So
that's
I'm
cool.
keeping busy.
How's Las Vegas? Is Las Vegas hot?
It's nice to 4:00 in the afternoon going by the pool and relaxing.
Oh, very nice, very nice.
I've never been able to do that.
I know. I can imagine.
No. Pool's 20, 30 degrees cooler than the outside temperature, so it's refreshing.
So let's move on to industry news. Ellen, you have something to say?
Yes, I do, because this week last week, we opened full registration for LDI. And I was very happy to see that it was like a lot of people were just like waiting at home with their hand on the gun, waiting to pull the trigger, which is not my favorite analogy, but there you go. And they're signing up right, left, and center for all kinds of courses. I think the Grand MA hands-on lighting console beginner class is already sold out. Wow. We have the largest LD Institute ever. We've gone from 50 courses to 75.
Wow.
In the same week.
Wow. That's
One
great.
of the most exciting things we're doing is a brand new 2-day rigging intensive called RIGZ, RIGZ. And it's being curated by me with Eric Rouse and Tracy Nunnally.
I knew it was Eric. Love Eric.
Yeah,
He's
Eric
a good friend of mine.
And Tracy Nunnally. And we actually have faculty of about, probably a dozen people, and 3 of them are women, which is amazing in the rigging field. So I'd like to thank Eric and Tracy for all the hard work they did on that. We also have Jake Pinholster, who just changed jobs. He's gone from Arizona to Illinois, Urbana-Champaign as the dean of the theater department.
As a new dean.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he and Mary Frank, who's an incredible visual designer, are pulling together our X Live at LDI. And that just makes me so happy because Jake, I think he was Stan's student for one thing. Didn't Jake come out of UF?
Jake was my student when he was an undergraduate at Florida, and a very honorary one at that, but extremely gifted.
Yes.
Well, you should be a dean. It's perfect to be a dean.
I have a claim to fame. Jake was very at the beginning of projection work, and I bought Jake his first projector, a Barco.
Well, there you go.
So I bought him his first digital projector, and then he studied with me. We did some interesting projects together, and I definitely claim Jake as one of mine, and got him involved in LDI when there were no internships at LDI. Remember,
Yep.
Ellen? We sort of got that going when Ann was doing that.
Yep.
And UF students used to dominate LDI interns world.
Yeah, PJ.
PJ.
And we still have both of them. Although PJ doesn't like to go by PJ anymore. He likes to go by Price. But I guess now that he's a professor and a father, he doesn't want to be called PJ. But Jake and I have both spent half of our lives involved with LDI. So
right. Well, I'm happy to say that I was a big part of the progenitor of both of those young men.
Right.
He will be a university president one day, and he'll be a brilliant one.
Yes, he is brilliant. And it's really been interesting to watch him sort of mature into these roles. When I first met him, he was like, he was a shaggy dog kind of kid,
Don't get me started on the discipline I had to administer to Jake when he used pirated software on university computers.
So back to LDI, we have really a lot of stuff going on this year. We have Ellen Marie Kazel, who is a fellow from USITT and the president of the Stage Managers Association Foundation, the second year of our stage management and show calling series, which we are now calling the Stage Managers Academy, which did really, really well for the first time last year. And we're hoping to build that. It's a whole new audience for LDI in terms of stage managers. But it's great seeing them. It's like they call all this stuff, so might as well go see how it works, you know?
Sounds very exciting. And the fact that, it's been pushed into December because of wonderful F1, it seems to be coming back.
The December dates actually are great because a lot of people are back in off the road by then. The tours are over. All the Broadway shows are open. Very little is going to open around the 5th to 10th of December. So actually those dates have turned out great for us, and we love the new West Hall. So everybody can go to www.ldishow.com to see everything that's going on. And I promise you that next week we will have a special code for free floor passes for anybody that listens to Light Talk.
Awesome. All right. That's what we've all been waiting for. Hey, do I get a free floor pass?
Absolutely.
No.
You get a speaker badge. You all get speaker badges.
Yeah, make sure Snoot's on the list, because for the last 2 years, Snoot was not on the list, and I had to take the wrath of Snoot. It was not a pretty sight.
Well, I'll give you the code, and she has to just go register.
Okay.
When will the Light Talk be at LDI?
Light Talk is on Sunday from 1:30 to 2:30.
Oh, 1:30 to 2:30. Oh, that's good.
Yep.
I like that. Much better than 4 to 5.
Brackley, talk a little about your 99th year of the portfolio review.
99th year. The portfolio review. Well, it's coming up, and it's going to be Saturday from 1 to 5, and we're lining up some of the same reviewers we had last year wanted to come back, so I'm offering it to them if they want to come back. So it should be a very exciting program.
Well, that's great, Brackley. Hey, how about we get started? Stan has the very first question of the day.
Jennifer in Florida asks, when my production is being prepared and people have questions, how available do I need to be to answer them? Do I check my email every 5 minutes? Do I let them call me at any hour of the day or night? What are your boundaries? I don't have an answer, so
I have an answer. Are you kidding me?
Go for it.
You have an answer.
Well, I wouldn't have to check my email every 5 minutes. I'd have the most boring life in the world. Okay, so I would not do that. I think no matter what business you're in, you need to have some boundaries for your personal life. And I think that if people respected that you are a human being with a life, they would not be calling you after a certain time at night, unless it's a dire emergency. So, if I have an idea for a show and it's like 11 o'clock at night, I'm not going to be texting the director about it at 11:05. In the morning, wait until the morning. It's not an emergency. And I think people need to respect you as well. My former wife once worked for an executive at a major motion picture company who would contact her in the middle of the night because she was like off in France at a film festival or something like that, complaining that her car didn't pick her up. Bullshit like that. And that is a problem because that's someone not respecting another one's life. Yeah, you need to make yourself available. Absolutely. If it's during the normal hours, if someone texts you, answer them. Absolutely. Email them back or whatever. If it's not an emergency, then wait until the morning and do it. What do you think, Brackley?
Yeah, and on weekends as well. I mean, people have to respect people's private lives on the weekends as well as after hours. It's a job. If yes, during work hours, yes, absolutely. But not, again, unless it's some sort of a dire emergency, which would have to be an emergency, then, wait till the next day or wait till Monday.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think, that in the theater, maybe sometimes boundaries get a little blurred because rehearsals can happen all the time, maybe 7 days a week, 10 out of 12. And people maybe are not as respectful of your boundaries if you really try to set them. But I think you're right. You really have to set them and hope that the rest of the team will respect them unless it really is an emergency and they really need you. There's a lot of these funny TikTok videos where this woman always says, I'm sorry, like her boss is saying, why do you log off at 5 o'clock? And she says, well, because that's when I stop getting paid. And she says, well, I would like you to be available all night. And she says, toodaloo.
Exactly. That's good.
And you just have to stand up for yourself.
I don't disagree with anything that you guys said. But this sort of came up for me recently, and it made me think about like doctors are on call. There are emergencies, and I have this problem in that I've been praised for this problem. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword. So if the phone rings, I'm in the habit of answering it. And I don't know, I think it's from my theater training, and because problems come up and they need attention right away because there's a clock ticking. Now that I don't work in theater so much and I work with architects, they're always sort of amazed that they'll send an email and within 5 minutes they get a response. And I've been called, man, you are like the Johnny on the spot guy. Like you are right there, reactive. And so in some ways, it sort of gave me a positive reputation. But at the same time, I'm sacrificing some of that family time or, I should just, my phone does stop taking calls at 6 o'clock p.m. But at the same time, I'm trying to break that agreement. And I think I made that agreement when I was young and it was good for me in terms of my career. But now I'm trying to sort of rewrite that agreement. And I think that's something that I've been focusing on in life in general. Like, why am I a certain way? Or why do I think a certain way? And going back to the original, thanks to this book I read, The Four Agreements, going back to the original agreement that I made, and maybe that agreement needs to be modified because the conditions have changed.
But, the other thing is, I guess it depends on how much of a workaholic you are, which I tend to be. And I tend to answer emails immediately because I get hundreds a day. And if they sit there too long, they don't get answered. So I do answer right away. But then if I decide to take a day off or a couple of hours off and really unplug and go someplace, people are like, are you all right? It's like, you didn't answer me.
Right. Well, that's what I'm getting at. Like, it's sort of endemic in certain industries. Like engineers, let me tell you, engineers are not like us. At 5 o'clock, you will not reach an engineer. Okay, but 9 a.m, you'll get an answer. So it just depends on the industry that we grew up in was very volatile and required very quick reactions, I think. And same like with doctors too, it's why they're on call. There's sort of like an urgency sometimes, and not everything is urgent. It's an interesting question, and I think it's like gives some food for thought for all of us.
Try Europe. It's like in the month of August, if you call someone in the States, they might say, I'm out of the office for 10 days, checking email and phone messages intermittently, might be slow in getting back to you. You call someone in Europe for the month of August, it says, I am out until September 10th. There will be no response.
There will be no response. Absolutely. Right. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cultural differences.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I do not answer calls from scam likely.
No, of course not.
No, right.
Never answer
unless
that.
you're really lonely. I mean, sometimes
but if
when
you
I get
are
lonely,
working on an opera at the San Francisco Opera and it's 9 o'clock at night and the director is calling, what do you do?
Well, usually the director's a friend of mine. I always answer it.
Right.
That's just the way it is. But I'll tell you one thing, Paul or Ken never calls me late.
Right, but if they did, it was because you knew they need something.
Yeah, or it's an emergency.
Right.
Absolutely, I'd answer it.
Yeah.
And I would answer from any director who's calling me that late.
It really depends on the situation.
Right. Dave from Dallas asks, I would like to buy some moving lights for our church. We have a limited budget, so is there a reason not to look at good used fixtures? And are there certain ones you would recommend?
Well, the work that we do, that would be very unusual because I don't think a municipal organization would be allowed to purchase with tax dollars used equipment because of warranty issues and so on. In private sector projects, like a small performing arts center or medium performing arts center that we do, we looked at that, but we always sort of come back to operationally, like, what are you going to do when it fails? How will it impact operations? So we sort of wouldn't. Now, in a situation where we might be doing, let's say, a charitable organization or an organization that really didn't have a lot of funding, we might look at that from a reputable used company, like a rental house that maintains their gear. But I think it's just a risk factor. So you have to weigh reward and risk. And if it turned out that the reward is greater than the risk, then maybe. But we have not. Since 2012, we've been operating in Florida. So I don't know how many years that is now. When we founded SKD, we have not specified any used equipment.
And does a company like ETC honor the warranty if it's a second owner? Like, what happens there?
I think they probably that's a good. Well, they would know when the fixture was produced based on its serial number. And so they probably would honor a warranty because of the kind of company that they are. I don't know for a fact. I've never tested that theory, but I don't know. Have you guys ever tested that theory?
There was a situation at school many years ago where our Ion had a glitch and it was actually out of warranty, and they helped us out. So that's when Stan, you say, well, that's the type of company they are. They are that type of company, which is why I like buying from them and speccing their equipment. It's always good equipment. But getting back to this question, as far as moving lights are concerned, I'd be very careful about buying a used moving light. I've told the story many times on the show. I'm not going to tell it again, but there was a company thought they were getting a great deal by buying a bunch of VL1000s that were on the road for like 5 years. And, because they got a great deal. And even though I said, do not do this is a big mistake, huge mistake, they did it. And for 10 years, they paid the price. It was not a pretty sight.
There's a big risk factor, depending on who you buy it from. If you buy it, out of a garage from eBay is different than if you went on like usedlighting.com. But even so, moving lights are just very particular. And you don't know how long they've been used. And if they've been used, as you said, on the road for years, you just don't know. And there is a risk factor.
There is a market, though. Like as somebody just said, the rental companies, like PRG does have an auction every once in a while.
Sure.
And certainly usedlighting.com and Gear Source and a couple of the other ones do a healthy business in especially consoles, maybe more than lights. I don't know.
Yeah, well, they're turning over their inventory, and they use it for 2 or 3 years, and then they just move on to the next brightest thing, and that's why LDI's there because because people can see, hey, maybe we should ought to buy 500 of these fixtures. They could give a damn about Brackley, me, and Stan going there saying, I would need 12 for my university. They said 12, that's peanuts.
Can I amplify something David just said? I think there is something to be said, and we have looked at this, where if you're doing a world tour for a megastar and you've got like LED screens with super, super duper high pitch, right? And now the pitch is even better. So there's some money, no object project, and they will buy the latest and greatest. And then the stuff that's coming off the tour that's been well taken care of, but maybe isn't the shiniest product on the block, then you can really pick up a deal.
Yeah, you could.
So I think David's point about somebody letting go of something, not because it's old and used, but because they got to have the newest thing, and then you could maybe get a deal. And I think that's probably a good strategy for some people to look at.
So what are we recommending for Dave in Dallas?
Well, I think talk to PRG, talk to usedlighting.com and look at the stuff.
If they can find out how long the units have been used, that's a big thing.
Yeah, mileage matters.
Right.
Like buying a used car.
And whoever they buy from, make sure that they'll warranty it for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's true.
The other thing I would say on that, if you're going to buy a specific recommendation, you can find good, decent used equipment on the websites we mentioned, PRG, usedlight.com, but look at the parts inventory. Let me plug another great company, Light Parts in Texas. We had a beautiful old classic hog control panel, and we lost the little beautiful aluminum dial. Where are you going to get that? Right? It's a beautiful thing. And so lightparts.com they have a lot of parts. So you might think about, if you're going to buy used, what's the availability of parts on that fixture? I would call lightparts.com and say, oh yeah, we got tons of those. Like we had Wibron scrollers for years. We had to get rid of them, we had difficulty finding parts. So I think what I learned working at Smithsonian, like the government, people like to joke about how much a tank costs or military hardware. But when they buy something like that, they buy a lot of parts. So they don't they buy that to think we're going to keep this thing going for, 30 years, 50 years. So if the parts are sort of out in the marketplace, then it might reduce the risk. And if the parts are easy to change.
Another thing might be the quality of the equipment from the first place. Like if you're buying a Robert Juliet, or a Clay Packy or Martin or whatever the serious brands, as opposed to, a Chinese knockoff or some cheap DJ equipment.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you get the good stuff in the first place, I remember when we got the second set of Verilights that they were selling, that they weren't leasing, and I remember talking to the salesperson about it, and he said, "Look, Verilight does not obsolete its own equipment." And I went, well, that's a really good selling point. And those two VL2201s are still sitting in the Light Lab at UF and still work. You are listening to Light Talk, and today Light Talk is sponsored by
Roadkill Laboratories Creative Lightworm, your very personal lighting assistant. With all the talk nowadays about the promises of artificial intelligence helping us at the production table, it is natural to feel that technology has taken over our jobs. Yes, AI is terribly disruptive. How dare someone replace you with a silicon chip? Well, the humanitarians and biological scientists at Roadkill Laboratories have come up with a new type of personal assistant that will only think and make decisions in your best interest. And that is Roadkill Laboratories' new Creative Lightworm. Why use artificial intelligence when you can use good old-fashioned biological intelligence? And what better source to get this intelligence than from a worm? What is a creative lightworm? It is a genetically developed living creature designed to be with you, well, actually inside of you, 24/7. That's right. We take your DNA and inject it into one of our own organically cultivated, farm-raised brainworms. Then, in a mostly painless outpatient surgical procedure, we inject this worm right into the right hemisphere of your brain. Your new colleague will organically stimulate this hemisphere, creating the most outrageous creative thoughts that you could ever imagine. In addition, unlike the cheap brainworms developed by our overseas competitors, whose worms die soon after getting their fill of your twisted, privileged brain cells, our creative lightworm has been scientifically developed not only to survive your entire life, but to self-propagate. That's right, in no time at all, you'll end up with an extended creative lightworm family inside your head. Imagine the explosion of ideas that your personal creative lightworm family will give you. Not only will the power of your creativity at the production table expand exponentially, but you will also no longer have to take any inspiration showers. Your creative team will wonder where the hell you come up with these wild ideas. So isn't it worth losing a few million brain cells to expand your creativity? Hey, you lose a lot more by watching political speeches and bad reality TV shows. Get off your ass now and order your own creative lightworm to live in your brain. Your collaborators will soon be saying, "Wow, our lighting designer just came up with the most amazing idea. Let's do a show with no actors."
Side effects may include high blood pressure, angina, dizziness, memory loss and fogginess, the formation of multiple cysts, uncontrolled spasms, shrinking of reproductive organs, may cause wild conspiracy fantasies, the desire to take selfies with and eat roadkill, using a chainsaw to decapitate whale heads, marrying bad actors, shameless political and moral hypocrisy, and an uncontrolled desire to eat apples.
That may be the most creative sponsor we've ever done.
Right.
I'm ordering my own worm, damn it.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those crazed monkeys and ducks wreaking havoc in Stan's Tesla tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about staying alive, staying alive.
The Bee Gees? We're going to talk about the Bee Gees?
We're talking about the Bee
Bee
Gees,
Gees.
okay? What happens when you cannot seem to please the director?
Ah.
See, we received an email from Michelle from New Orleans, and she writes, "I am designing a show that is way behind schedule, mostly due to the director not being happy with what I am creating on stage. Everyone is pressuring me to work faster, but nothing seems to please this guy. What can I do before I get fired?" Wow.
Been there, done
That's a
that.
tough one.
I'm so glad
Right.
I don't work with directors like that anymore.
It's not about you. It's about them. You cannot take it personally.
That's right. But she's probably a young designer, and this person is being a total jerk. Instead of working with, is just being obviously not happy with anything she's doing. And she's kind of behind the eight ball because she's probably working in a theater that has very limited time. I mean, she's not there doing a 7-day pre-tech like I got to do last week. She's working probably in a 3-day production schedule. And by the time the show opens, either she's been fired or she's killed the director. One of the two things have happened, right? Or they've worked it out. It's just one of those things that you have to stay above board. You can't lower yourself into a bad situation. You can't get caught up in that. Maybe you just need to do something that I suggested last week, is when you're having difficulties with somebody, take them off to the side and talk to them privately about it and try to work out the communication. Because, again, like I said last week, this could be a problem with communication.
And if you survive that show, just don't be with that director again.
Well, the interesting thing is that, I don't know the last time I did my resume. It was probably 20 years ago. But I had a list of directors I've worked with in my entire career. And there were over 60 or 70 names on there. And starting 20 years ago, you know how many directors I work with? Maybe 4 or 5. This is what happens in your career. You eventually get rid of the people you don't connect with. And this sounds like someone who obviously is having a hard time connecting with you and you connecting with him.
Well, surround yourself with the people who set the example that you would like to be. But, it's hard to do when you're starting out, like you guys were saying. But I might just add, sounds like the heat in that kitchen is pretty hot. So wrap yourself in insulation, get through this kitchen, get this dish cooked and get out of that kitchen.
Ellen, you've been in the business for many, many years. You've met so many people
Yes.
in different forms. I'm sure that there were people in your past that for some reason you guys just couldn't connect with. How did you solve those problems?
Well, yes. I mean, that's true. And, also I worked in some summer theaters, which are really pressure cookers, like the Williamstown Theater Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Where there's a massive number of shows that are produced in a very short amount of time. And some of the directors were, really loose cannons, screaming at people and, making unreasonable demands. And it really was never the designer's fault, or the
Right.
costume designer's fault or the, whatever fault. And other directors were totally different. So I think it depends on the personality. And some people just don't work well under that kind of pressure. There's also a chemistry factor, I think. Some people, like when you're interviewing people for a job, sometimes in the first 30 seconds, you can tell whether you could ever work with them or not. Then you can sort out, whether they're really qualified and what the salary requirements are and all the rest of it. But from the Weathervane Theater where I used to work in New Hampshire, we used to go to some of the New England regional auditions for actors and stuff. And so the director would lean over every once in a while and say to us, "This Gertrude monologue is the longest 30-second hour and a half I've ever heard." So, I think a lot of it depends on personality and scheduling and a lot of things that go into it. So I would tell your friend from New Orleans to stick by your guns, do the best she can, get through the situation. And if that director calls again, maybe just be honest and say yes, but.
I would just add one thing to everything. I agree with Ellen as well. The chemistry, I don't know. Sometimes like David just had this delightful experience, and I said that's the 1 in 10. So those are the ones you live for. But I would also say this is a recognition if you're young. This is not a business filled with a huge stockpile of stable individuals.
Speak for yourself.
A stockpile of stable individuals.
Yes,
I think that's
yes.
the title. I'm trying to get down right now.
I'm calling them as I'm seeing them. Okay,
Stable.
it just isn't. Now there are sometimes you get into these great groups like a chemistry that's fantastic, and they produce work, and we've had a lot of people talk about those are great, and those are the ones you live for. But in aggregate, it's not full of a lot of stable people, and maybe you don't want that because creatives are not. You need sort of these wacky people to come up with these amazing ideas. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a reality, and if you're not prepared for that, find another line of work.
I think it's not reality. I think you go into the theater to avoid reality.
Right. We're trying
Exactly.
to make up our own reality.
And the other thing
I'm
is,
talking about the reality in the making of the art.
I understand. But you ever notice like some actors, they really only are that role or the next role or the last role. There's no there other than the actors, the roles. Not all actors are like that.
I also think that experience matters as well. The more directors you work with, the more you can kind of handle all the different kind of personalities. I think that helps too.
Right.
I don't think we helped her out very much, but that's what we got.
I'd say stick to your guns. Yeah, stick to it and you'll get through it. And hopefully it doesn't say that the direction stunk and the lighting design saved the show.
There was that one New York Times review. I'll never forget it. This poor lighting designer, it was his first show on Broadway. I'm not going to mention any names. And the first 2-3 paragraphs were about him, about how wonderful the lighting was.
Oops.
And then the fourth paragraph, it was like, even though so-and-so did this amazing job lighting it, the show was horrible. Direction was horrible. The social horrible. And you know, that was that lighting designer's only show on Broadway. Nobody called him.
Right.
Commercial theater. Gotta love it.
Right.
All right. Well, Brackley has our last question of the day.
Well, Betsy from South Carolina asks, we actually have a theater with a combination of Altman 360Q instruments and Fresnels. We desperately need an upgrade. Would you recommend going to incandescent source 4s or getting all LEDs?
Well, I'd say all LEDs, the incandescent source 4s, are on the way out, right?
Really?
So are the 360Qs.
360Qs, they were out 30 years ago.
Right.
But some of the older theaters still have some, but yes, so. It's an interesting question. We actually had a 99-seat theater at our university that had a bunch of 360Qs. There were the hand-me-downs. And we had a whole dimmer racks that were not working very well. So we ended up going with LEDs because you don't want to be paying for dimmers because dimmers are going to be outsourced pretty soon. So if you have the option, I would say go with LEDs. It's just a matter of cost and price.
I mean, we just did a project for the University of Wyoming. It had old strand, early generation dimmers, and the budget was limited. And they have submovers, no LEDs, mostly discharge. They have lots of incandescent, and they have some LED. And so the question was, how would we handle that for them, knowing where the industry is going? And what we ended up doing on the distribution side, Brackley, to your point about the dimmers, is we thought we were going to push them into less fixtures, automation, or user rule philosophy, LED, but we just couldn't get there with a $300,000 budget for the whole shebang. Couldn't do it with installation costs. So we ended up doing some power distribution for LED for some circuits, and then we put in, maybe people don't know this, and I learned this too, that on an SR48 rack, a traditional ETC dimmer rack, you can mix it with incandescent dimmers, D20s and R20s and relays for LED. So even though that's more expensive than a Sensor IQ distribution panel, so we did that. So in some places, Sensor IQ panels, in some places, because they're in that traditional, that transitional phase where they're going to move from, eventually the incandescents will go away, but they can't quite get all the way there yet. And so when they do, they can always pull out those D20s and put in relay modules for power distros. So that's how we sort of threaded the needle on that one. So, but yeah, so we are in that for sure for many facilities in that transitional period where you have to sort of walk that balance, thread that needle, if you will.
Okay. Well, I thought this question would take about 5 seconds to answer, but because that ship has sailed, that whole incandescent thing, it's sailed, and they've gotten to a point where it's very close now. Although I just did a show, I think a lot of it
just depends on financing.
Yeah, but go LED. Don't waste your money.
Right.
I mean, who would you hire? Would you hire an old, 69-year-old light designer or a 25-year-old hot lighting designer with a creative light worm?
69-year-old.
The 69-year-old? Okay, there you go.
Depends on the show.
That's true. It does depend on the show. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website at lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook. And subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
just remember that if you have the guts to litigate us, we have a very tough snoot group with the legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase, who will knock you down and defend us until our retirement funds are completely depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers and Sisters, coming to you from Long Beach, St. Bart's, Gainesville, and Sin City, Las Vegas.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you more of our casserole of nonsense.
We are the light-talking people, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge, and we sprinkle in a little bit of humor all around the world.
And we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye.